Katerina Yaka watched the German soldiers flee. Streaming from the east, that's what she was seeing. Allied bombers flew above them. She thought they all might die, and then soon there was the silence of all the SS men. When the sun rose the next morning, it was the 1st of May, and they all sang the Internationale. They all sang the Internationale. Katerina Yaka saw red flags flapping in the breeze above the Russian tanks, and she fell upon her knees. And so many different voices in so many different tongues sang the most beautiful song that could ever have been sung. In German, Lithuanian, in Polish and in Dutch, a myriad of melodies has never had been such. In Russian and in Yiddish, Italian and French, emerging from the forests beneath the trench. When the sun rose the next morning, it was the 1st of May, and they all sang the Internationale. When the sun rose the next morning, it was the 1st of May, and they all sang the Internationale. They all sang the Internationale. Völker hört die Signale auf zum letzten Gefecht. Die Internationale erkämpft das Menschenrecht. Völker hört die Signale auf zum letzten Gefecht. Die Internationale erkämpft das Menschenrecht.
Hello and welcome to Revolutionary Socialist Review. This is Chris Driscoll, and along with me is my co-host, Rainer Shea. Yes, Rainer. Today was Inauguration Day. So the first topic up for us today is the Joe Biden inauguration. And goodbye to Donald Trump. I love, there we go. You can see my hand there. That's, you know, as Biden himself said, there'll be no change. He's not going to change anything. And he proved that today. Although he did the first thing he did right out of the gate was he signed a slew of new executive orders. As a matter of fact, he went down in history today, becoming the president who signed the largest number of executive orders on his first day. And these executive orders, I commented on it on a broke page earlier today that, in my opinion, Joe Biden knows something that Donald Trump doesn't, and that is that an effective capitalist ruling class approach to repressing and exploiting the working class is to have a large number of indigenous lapdogs, that's what I call them, people who are, you know, black and brown and women and, you know, tokens, in other words, who are placed in spots of administration. The British did that in India. That was the way 200,000 British could control 200 million Indians. They had an army full of these toadies, these lapdogs, loyal lapdogs. And that's basically what Joe Biden's after, which Donald Trump wasn't so much after that. He was, anyway, a lot of his executive orders have to do with shoring up support for the Joe Biden regime among that toady class, among those people who are the loyal lapdogs to the capitalist class, people who oftentimes come out of the working class, but who have sold their souls to the devil. In this case, the devil being the capitalist ruling class. And that's most of what he did. He shored up his support among environmentalists, bourgeois environmentalists, among bourgeois feminists. Shored up his support among the black misleadership caste. He shored up his support and tried to mend fences with other imperialist nations who have traditionally belonged to the US-led global imperialist system. And that was what he did the first day. So I guess, you have to admire him in a way, being a senile old doddering pedophile that he is, that he accomplished a lot for the class that he serves, the capitalist ruling class, on his first day. Donald Trump said goodbye in the morning, drove off or flew off. I guess he flew, but all the moving trucks and everything were at the White House. And he sped off down to Mar-a-Lago, which apparently the people in Mar-a-Lago don't want him, and they're using a clause in the contract that he signed to buy property in Mar-a-Lago that basically that gives them the right to throw him out, and so they're pursuing that to try to get rid of him out of Mar-a-Lago. That's just the upper tip of the iceberg that's coming towards him, because there are a lot of state people in states around the country who are out to get him. And because he failed to pardon himself, he doesn't have a pardon on the federal level either. So there will be a lot of legal legal proceedings against him in the future. That's something we can confidently predict. Trump apparently left a very nice letter for Joe Biden, which is a tradition. Outgoing and incoming imperial presidents leave each other these letters on Inauguration Day. They leave it on the desk where the president sits. And Joe Biden would not show the letter, but he said that it was very gracious and kind or some such. So, and there was no coup. Apparently the fascists who support Donald Trump blew their entire wad on January 6th in their failed coup on January 6th. So there was really, even all across the country at state houses that were loaded up, they were surrounded by National Guards people, by National Guard who had been called out to protect the state houses, as well as National Guard from, I guess, from the surrounding states, who were called out in DC to protect the Capitol building, the site of the last attempted insurrection by the fascists. And nowhere was that I've heard, I don't know if you've heard anything different, but nowhere that I've heard had any problems with the fascists. So I guess for now. uh, Rainer, you said it best, and I have to give you credit for this. You said, that these imperialists are paper tigers. That fits well for these fascists too. The fascists are also paper tigers, apparently. But I'm sure you'll tell us more about the imperialist paper tigers a little bit later on. So that's it for me. What are your thoughts, Rainer, on this historic day?
I'm surprised that there haven't been a series of even bigger violent protests in these last few days, because I saw headlines saying that there were going to be violent protests at all the state capitals around the country on the 17th. This seemingly didn't materialize, and this is like you said, they seem to have blown their wad, and I think it's notable in these last couple of weeks or so that we've seen how willing these types are to try to carry out their goals, yet they're pretty ineffectual. They can be pretty ineffectual, especially against the state. Recently on social media, I posted something that was mocking the MAGA people, and many dozens of them were swarming my post, and actually multiple amounts of my posts, and saying they were talking a bunch of shit to the effect that they were puffing up their chests. And a lot of them had anime profile pics. Others had had there was an actual guy who was flexing his arm, which is another occasional trend I've seen among these online reactionaries. And you know the types that I'm talking about.
Yes.
But
I have some in my family.
They like to puff up their chests, especially online, but their abilities to carry out tactical actions are limited. I mean, we've seen how in these last few weeks, around 3 of them were killed out of their own ineptitude, which mirrored something that happened a few months before, where one MAGA dude at a rally, I think it was at a protest, he tried to assault somebody, and the security guard shot him and immediately killed him.
Yeah.
So these are the kinds of overconfident moves that these wannabe warrior patriots tend to make. So we can find some encouragement from that, and that they like to puff up their chests, but they're often overconfident and unwise to their own detriment. I don't know if anyone was even trying to kill those guys. The police don't want the people like that dead, but they really wanted to get in the game of clashing with police.
Yeah.
And so a few of them got themselves killed. What we really need to focus on in terms of our militancy is the state, learning the tactics that the military and the police use, learning the kinds of armor, the kinds of martial arts training that they use, learn how they think, learn their routines, learn everything about their programs and about their models for waging counterinsurgency warfare.
Okay, well said. On to the next, and this is actually an article by Rainer Shea. The U.S. trend towards more war, repression, and inequality.
I've noticed how in these last 4 administrations in particular, Bush, Obama, and Trump, and now it's going into Biden, there's been this steady upward tick expanding warfare, of ever greater military budgets. These have gone along with expansions of the surveillance state, erosions of civil liberties, along with accelerating neoliberal policies, especially since the 2008 crash. And this, when this trend started after 9/11, it was built upon decades before then, where there was mass incarceration, there was the normalization of neoliberalism around the world. There were some erosions of civil liberties, though it really got alarmingly authoritarian after 9/11. And I think that this is not something historically exceptional. I mean, the people, especially in the global South, in the third world, have been living under U.S. created dictatorships for more than the last century. Colonialism and imperialism, they're versions of fascism that are enacted against the disfavored, unlucky groups. I think that in this last half century, these horrors of imperialism have been coming home. There's been more exploitation, less freedom, more militarization of police, which has gone along with an ever intensifying paradigm of warfare, which I don't think is going to end anytime soon. I think that the United States is going to keep being at war for as long as it exists, until we overthrow the state in a proletarian revolution. So this is the observation that I was trying to make in this article, that it seems like we're stuck in an endless, vicious cycle where there's more warfare, more expansions of bombings and dronings and occupations. Lately, it's been leaning more into proxy warfare, that which Biden certainly plans to expand upon. And I'm wondering, when are things going to give? When is the, when, particularly when it comes to the warfare, when is the U.S. going to be forced to start scaling back?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that question, but what I do know about repression, inequality, and war coming from the capitalist ruling class in the United States and their allies in Europe and Japan and so forth, in the Anglosphere countries like Australia and New Zealand. It's ever present, and it has been ever present, at least in the American empire. It's been ever present since the founding of the United States in 1776. It goes up and it goes down. I mean, it subsides for a while, then it's trotted out. Police state is what I call it. This kind of repression in our country. It's police state, and they ramp it up when they need it. More recently, we've seen a big ramp up of it, and we're going to continue. Matter of fact, I think, and this is what you and I, Rainer, have both been predicting in the last year, when Biden is president, which he is now. I mean, as of today, I think we're going to start seeing a big ramp up of the police state, even worse than we saw during the Obama and Clinton, Obama, the first Bush regime, George Herbert Walker Bush, and then the second Bush regime, W. Bush, and Trump. it goes up, it goes down. Right now, it's not on the ups. Police state in America is definitely on the upswing. We see it all over. We see signs of it all over, and we're going to continue to see signs of it all over. So that's all. That's my first thought upon listening to your description of that article. Anything else on that?
No. Well, other than that, we'll see how it goes. Maybe 10 years from now, it's likely that at some point the empire will have to start pulling back its forces. There's already hints that it's going to have to scale back within the Middle East, for one, though clearly the empire plans to use this as an opportunity to occupy more of the Indo-Pacific as a way to counter China.
Yeah, I think we're going to continue to see what we've seen since Obama, which is a shifting of forces towards the what do they call it? The Indo-Pacific or whatever, the Pacific and Indian Ocean regions. That's where we'll see the shift. And of course, what we've already been seeing big time, a shift of forces towards the Russian border. That has been happening, and I see no reason to believe that Biden will change that. As a matter of fact, he's assured us that he won't be changing that. He won't be changing pretty much anything from the primary imperial program pursued by Obama and then by Trump, and now we can expect it to be pursued by Biden. So next on the list, FBI report issued prior to the failed fascist insurrection on January 6th warned of extreme violence and Trump supporters calling for war. And CGTN, that's China Global TV Network, one of my two favorite online TV networks. They had an op-ed by our good old buddy, Danny Haifang. Danny's been on the show, I think 3 times at least. And in that op-ed, Danny contrasts American liberal and conservative treatment of Washinton rioters with the riots in Hong Kong last year and other places that were aimed against China. So kudos to Danny, first of all, for that, getting it into a big, global global outlet like CGTN. CGTN has seen this was on CGTN English, but I think they have it in other languages too, and it's pretty most places in the world where it can be. You can catch CGTN. I also recommend CGTN to anybody out there. You can get it online. Just search for CGTN, or most cable networks and the 2 major satellite networks carry it, so you can get it that way. Anyway, the treatment of rioters in the United States on January 6th, we've commented on this ever since then, about how the cops put on their kid gloves to deal with, and in fact, in many cases, enabled and actually aided these fascist rioters. We've seen that. As a matter of fact, the next topic 4 is all about that. But we've seen that by Washington's treatment, both American liberals and conservatives, on the other hand, dealt with the Hong Kong riots in a much, much different way. These were the same kinds of people. We should note that from the get-go. These Hong Kong rioters were fascists. They were exactly the same kind of fascists as were attempting insurrection in Washington, D.C. on January 6th. The Hong Kong rioters carried American flags and Nazi paraphernalia, just like the American version of fascists. They were, for all intent and purposes, they were fascist terrorists in Hong Kong. Yet the American conservative political class, as well as the liberals in the political class, essentially the toadies for the capitalist ruling class, the faithful lapdogs that I was talking about earlier. But especially it's astounding. People like Nancy Pelosi standing with these these Chinese fascists and taking photo ops with them. They treated them like they were global heroes. Whatever it was, a couple of weeks ago on January 6th, Nancy Pelosi was not of the same mind about the American version of the same thing. So, as I say, kudos to Danny for that op-ed in CGTN, or it's on CGTN's main English language page, or their main English language website. And I think they featured him in a TV version of it too, a video version. And also, this was quite astounding to me, this FBI report. The FBI report was issued by the Norfolk, Virginia field station of the, is that what they call it? Field something, office or whatever, of the FBI. They issued it the day prior, on January 5th, the day prior to the insurrection. And they had gathered all this intelligence that was easily gathered, because a lot of it was just like from online sources that you or I could have seen, like Parler, that kind of thing. And they sent this memo, this report, out to FBI offices all over the country and to the central office in Washington, D.C. And so every FBI person should have known that this was coming. And yet, the next day, responding to reporters' questions, the director of the FBI claimed that he knew nothing about that they knew nothing about the chatter online among these fascists. So, quite astounding. It's just more of an indication that cops everywhere in the United States tend to be fascist. So they were at least enabling. Go ahead. Sorry.
Wasn't I talking about this a couple of years ago? I was talking so much about how at a certain point we're going to see the extent to which white supremacists are integrated into law enforcement, as well as the military.
Yeah.
I think further down the line, we're going to actually see the military aspect of what I'm talking about. Namely, when the military is called in to quell an uprising, that's inevitably going to come when a worse economic crash, pandemic, natural disaster wave, etc., hits the United States sometime in the coming decades. this is what the military anticipates will happen. They anticipate that the army will have to be sent in to try to keep the United States whole during this this era of turmoil. And at that point, we're going to see an extremely escalated version of what we've been seeing now of violence and campaigns of terrorism carried out by the reactionaries in tandem with law enforcement and the military. This is why we need to study tactical topics. We need to get trained, equipped for militancy, or we'll be sitting ducks.
Yes, defense is all important. I think that you're right. I think that they will attempt to send military in on these situations that we know will be arising in the coming decade. But I think that they will be awfully surprised because the primarily working class, more working class than ever, actually, U.S. military, both in the National Guard and in the active Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force, and so forth. They are more. I've seen the statistics. I had gathered some of them. I think I showed some of them here about a month or two ago. The military is more working class than ever. And I think what we're going to find is that, yes, they are attempting, the upper brass of the military are attempting to fascicize the military, to train them and indoctrinate them in fascist ideology, indoctrination. However, what they're going to find is that the loyalty of these working class victims of the economic draft aren't going to be going with it. As a matter of fact, they're going to see a lot of insurrection inside the military. That's my prediction. And I am totally confident in that because I'm totally confident in the American working class. Very recent example coming from yesterday is that, there were about 25,000 National Guards brought in to guard the U.S. Capitol building. And as part of that, there was a vetting process to vet out people who had known sympathies with the January 16th rioters. And 28 people were yanked from this force and put under investigation. 28 members of the National Guards that were sent in. Now, to me, the fact that only 28 out of 25,000 National Guards were stupid enough to be chattering about their fascistic plans and fascistic intentions online, which is the way they were all caught. Well, actually, they were caught two ways. They were caught through that, or they were caught through their fellow guards thinking on them, reporting them to the investigative body. So, I think if they're relying on using the National Guards in this country at this stage, when they're more working class than ever, more black than ever, more brown than ever, more women than ever, I think they're going to be sorely, sadly surprised. They meaning the capitalist ruling class and their faithful lapdogs in the political class.
I I think you do have a good argument. I can't dispute if the statistics are about the working class demographic is true. I can't dispute that that a lot of them are of the same class as us. And if they're of the same class as us, there is indeed potential to flip a lot of them. Though there's also the aspect that mirrors what you mentioned earlier about how the empire likes to put tokens within positions of power.
Yeah.
How it puts loyal members of these minority groups and oppressed groups within its ranks.
Yes, that's been the modus operandi for everybody, for every imperialist running a big imperialist operation, a big imperialist country, for at least the last 150 years, except for Trump. Trump seemed to be the one dimwit who didn't get this idea very well. I mean, even Trump had his tokens. Women and black people, black middle class people who were his special toadies that were given lucrative jobs in the Trump regime. But overall, Trump spent more time attacking these people than trying to appeal to them. Biden, the much more effective evil. I think Glenn Ford was the one who came up with that. Anyway, that Biden, the more effective evil, he's a lot more, a lot smarter about that. Even though he is senile and doesn't know quite where he is at times, and can have his sister and his wife standing right next to him in public and mistake his wife for his sister and his sister for his wife. He does have his moments. I've seen reports that that they have him all drugged up when they put him out in front of the public, and I have no doubt about that. Anyway, any more on that?
No.
Okay. Topic number 4, Capitol Police failures. Pelosi praised the Capitol Police. And The Guardian, in a article today, says U.S. cops are 3 times as likely to attack left-wing, or 3 times more likely, I'm sorry, to attack left-wing protesters than right-wing protesters. So, first of all, the Capitol Police failures. There were pictures, there were video pictures, there were security camera footage of Capitol Police actually aiding the fascist protesters on January 6th. And there were pictures in multiple cases of them just throwing the doors wide open and inviting them, these armed insurrectionists, into the Capitol building. There were pictures, video of Capitol off-duty Capitol Police actually entering the building as part of the fascist crowd, and hooping and hollering just like the other idiot fascists. So it was pretty clear, and astounding people. I mean, even like right wingers like Joe Scarborough. I saw Joe on Morning Joe on MSNBC accusing the Capitol Police of helping these fascists, and he was outraged. So, I mean, even somebody like Joe, who was considered a far right-wing congressman when he was a congressman in the 1990s, even somebody like him was astounded at this activity of the Capitol police, Nancy Pelosi, now the Speaker of the House of Representatives, the Democrat Party Speaker of the House of Representatives, went on TV the next day and praised the Capitol Police up and down. What a wonderful people that they protected us in the Capitol. And if you can believe it, it is, believe me, absolutely true. There is film. You can watch it, look it up yourself on your favorite internet search engine. So there you have it. Rainer, what are your thoughts?
Sounds like there's disagreement among these types over how to view it. It's a confusing event, one that reflects the meme where the two Spider-Men are pointing at each other. In this case, the two Spider-Men are the MAGA warrior, patriot LARPers, and the police, the white supremacists and the law enforcement, and they're one and the same. And you could say that this meme applies to the broader U.S. political establishment right now. And everybody's accusing everybody else of being a fascist or being a traitor. That's the word that they like to bandy about, traitor, which gets into a more long-term facet of this. Is going to become a more long-term facet of what we're seeing right now, where when communists attempt an insurrection, when they attempt to overthrow the capitalist state, creates something like Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, except more effective than the rhetoric from the media and the political classes that these communists will be enemies of the people, that they'll be traitors. And you could argue that they're traitors, but they're traitors to a state that does not deserve legitimacy. It's not legitimate. It's the most evil government on earth, and it's oppressing, killing people around the world every day. We see the preparations for this repression of legitimate rebellion in the steps to pass a Patriot Act 2.0, which I'm interested in seeing when it will be passed. Perhaps it will be in these next few days, and what exactly it will look like. Biden was the one who primarily helped write the original Patriot Act in 2001.
Yes, and he boasts about it all the time. Imagine that. Yeah. Well, as we've been predicting, we're going to see a real ramp up of the police state, of this form of state fascism. And so get ready for it. Next on our list, topic number 5, the Perpetual War Paradigm and the prospects for revolution. And Rainer, as you describe that, I'm going to step away for a minute. So take it away.
In this last week, as I've seen Mike Pompeo manipulate the truth, as I've seen these Trump White House figures lying about Xinjiang, lying about Iran, lying about Yemen's Houthis, lying about Venezuela and Cuba, I've thought back to an infamous quote from Karl Rove. He was one of the Bush administration's big propaganda manipulators. He said that he said something along the lines of how people like him, people who create propaganda for the war machine, are in the business of creating new realities. That was how he described them, new realities. And I see this as a declaration from this grandiose imperialist imperialist, that the U.S. capitalist class is going to have a permanent rule, that the rule of the bourgeoisie as the prime arbiters of history is going to be never ending. And this was, again, how Karl Rove described it. He said that we are the actors of history, and we're an empire now. So when we act, we're creating new realities. And I see this as a declaration that through using war, through making war eternal, they think that they're going to make their rule eternal. This is a very Orwellian concept, the idea of a despotic ruling class maintaining their rule forever by making war eternal. But is this going to actually reflect how history will develop? I don't think so. I think that all that it is U.S. imperialists at a later stage, at a pretty late stage in the transition of the U.S. empire towards collapse and decline. I see this as a form of idealism on their part, where they're believing their power to be untouchable, believing themselves to be infallible, thinking that through war and through war propaganda, they're going to invent a new reality, an alternative reality, complete with alternative facts that are going to forever vindicate their power structure. This can only go so far. There are material limitations to this game that they're playing, this game of trying to endlessly perpetuate capitalism and empire. As Mao said, no matter how much the reactionaries try to hold back the wheel of history, the inevitable trend, independent of any individual's will, is that history is going to develop from capitalism to socialism, that the proletariat are going to take control over governance and transform civilization. And this certainly runs counter to the theory that people like Karl Rove have been creating. Their idea of theory is to make grandiose and ahistorical statements about how we're an empire now and how we're creating new realities. This is idealism. Material conditions don't care about their idealism.
Well put. Hold this down. You hear me better now?
A little better.
Well, maybe I'll pull it. How about now?
Yes.
Okay, good. Well put is what I said. And yeah, two perspectives on perpetual war. There's the perspective that we have ourselves, and there's the perspective that our class enemies in the capitalist ruling class have, and their loyal lapdogs like Karl Rove. And who will win? Well, so far throughout history, we have been the winners, they have been the losers. We've had some setbacks, that's true. All struggles throughout history have some setbacks. There's nothing unusual about that. We've had our setbacks, but we have all the reason in the world to be confident, and they don't. This perpetual war paradigm, ultimately, as the empire declines and as their advantages decline, like their advantage of having been the reserve currency of the world since the end of World War II, as that declines, and we can really see it declining in this last year, and we can predict in this coming year of 2021 that it will decline precipitously. It's a complicated thing to explain, but being the reserve currency has allowed the American empire to basically create money out of nothing. You know, money for nothing in your chicks for free, I guess, as the Pink Floyd said. They said something like that. Anyway, their decline, they're not going to have the money to pay for this perpetual war in the future. I think you mentioned this earlier, Rainer. And so, yeah, prospects for revolution. I am optimistic. And I am optimistic because of my confidence in the working class globally and in the United States. I am of the opinion that the great majority of the working class, I mean, the working class is 70% of the American population, and I think like 80% of that 70% are progressive, are looking towards real social change, and are fed the fuck up with the 45 years of neoliberalism that we have suffered, and the drastic blows against the working class around the world and here at home that have been the main the main results of neoliberalism. The new liberals, really just like the old liberals. I don't know if I've ever gone on with you about how sick and tired I am of the overuse of the prefix neo, new. It's Greek for new. How tired I am of how overused it is. And I think calling these people neoliberals, that goes too far. These are old liberals. This is the way liberals have been for 300 fucking years, maybe more like 400. But I mean, they've definitely been climbing up into the ruling class in the last 300 years. And they've always been this kind of despicable, hateful, repressive, exploitative class. Perpetual war is in their nature. Imperialism is in their nature. Capitalism and all the ills of capitalism is in their nature. And these are all things that really don't go down well with the working class. You can see it, especially among the vanguards of the working class, the black working class and the brown working class, sectors of the female working class. These vanguards, definitely not down with the whole neoliberal thing. They're not down with the perpetual war thing, the perpetual imperialist war thing. And that is why I firmly believe that the prospects for revolution are good, even in the next decade. I think it's pretty good. It's just my personal views. Just my, what do they say on the online? In my humble opinion. Yeah. So that's my thoughts. Any more on that, Rainer?
No, I love your speech.
Good. I appreciate your love. Topic 6, another Rainer Shea original. Fears of proletarian revolution are behind the campaign to censor the internet. This, by the way, Just by way of introduction, this has been quite frightening, quite disturbing, especially in the last few weeks. The censorship of the internet, mostly by the liberal wing of the capitalist ruling class. So take it away, Rainer Shea.
As we just described, the state has in many ways worked to help facilitate the Capitol Hill riots, even though the dominant faction of the state has cracked down against those who've helped in the riots. It's pretty clear that there's a sense of overall class solidarity between the fascists and the state, because really the fascists, like I said, they're one of the twin Spider-Men who are pointing at each other like in the meme. But that's not the case when it comes to revolutionary socialists and anti-imperialists versus the state. Obviously, everything that we stand for goes against what the state and the fascists stand for, which is why as soon as seemingly just a number of hours after these riots happened, and after Trump was banned from social media, and after these platforms started cracking down on those who are promoting white supremacist violence, these platforms also started banning a bunch of leftist and communist anti-imperialist accounts. And Susie Dawson was one of the people who was banned from Twitter. I was banned from Facebook for a couple days, which I don't know how likely it was that could have been a coincidence. There were a bunch of people on our side who were banned, and I think there's going to be a continued trend towards anti-imperialists getting persecuted by these social media outlets, as has been the case for many years. But I think it's accelerating now as the political climate gets more tense, and as the Patriot Act 2.0 comes so close to fruition. I think the end game of this censorship campaign, no, I know that the end game of this censorship campaign is something total, something where the military gets involved to try to repress any hint of anti-imperialist, anti-US sentiment within the zones that the military, as I said, plans to occupy within the United States in the coming decades. I know this because I remember a report from the US Army War College from 2016, where these military experts said that after these future domestic invasions happen, the military is going to have to, as it described, keep track of individuals who are capable of influencing online opinion against the US military. And apparently they also plan, as they actually said, that they also plan to shut down internet and cell phone access for people within the occupied zones, so that the US Army can get the local media within these zones to put out only official US military propaganda. This is the future of censorship in this country, something that you would expect would happen in the mythical version of North Korea that the propaganda apparatus has created. It's so ironic that they paint North Korea as a place where nobody can say anything that conflicts with what this supposedly evil government says, that propaganda is forced upon everyone all the time. Yet the end game of these imperialists is to create exactly that within the United States.
Yeah. They are really getting ready to come after us. That's why what you talked about a couple of weeks ago is so important, Rainer, and that is alternative forms of communication. We need to think ahead. We need to go get this stuff up and ready now so that we can communicate when they shut us down. And as you said to begin with, the tens of thousands of leftists have been reporting being kicked off one or the other, or banned on one or the other major social media platforms. And of course, during the same time, as I mentioned last week, the focus has all been on the banning of Trump on Facebook and Twitter and so forth. So it's almost as though it were being used by the liberal wing, the globalist wing of the capitalist ruling class, as a diversion from what's really going on vis-a-vis social media. So yeah, it's be prepared, start preparing, prepare those alternative communications methods. China, Taiwan, and the American empire. Trump and Biden. That's all I have here. But what this refers to, let me just get it up here so I can refer to it if I can. Let me see. Here it is. Yeah, what this refers to is a segment from RT America's show called In Question. In Question's a really great show, by the way. If you ever catch it, I think you'll see what I mean. But this is a discussion. This was a discussion between the reporter and the former member of Parliament, MP as they call it, in Britain, George Galloway, who I've mentioned quite often, quite admire. Anyway, just to read a little bit, this will only take a minute or less, but Trump ambassador's trip to Taiwan enrages China. Trump ambassador's trip to Taiwan enrages China on the heels of U.S. Secretary of State, as of yesterday, he's Secretary of State, no more, but U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo's canceled Europe trip after Luxembourg's foreign minister and other top EU officials effectively stood him up on their meeting. U.S. Ambassador Kelly Craft's visit to Taiwan is being called off. Her planned trip angered Beijing, with Chinese officials saying the United States should not conduct direct diplomatic relations with Taiwan without notification, that is notification of the Chinese government. Former UK MP George Galloway dives in. That's what it says here. So this is just a blurb talking about this. But the main thing here, China, Taiwan, and the American empire. This was really kind of a comical way for Trump to go out. This all happened in the last week. Under the Trump regime, apparently the American empire has been being rejected right and left. And to me, the astounding aspect of this is that these countries, even a tiny, tiny little country like Luxembourg, they feel now with the weakened American empire that they can ignore it with impunity. This is just one more sign of the decline of the American empire. And I think it's a good sign. So that's why I titled this, I mean, this is I think indicative of what we're going to see more and more in the future. It was also indicative of the hatred by countries all over the world of Donald Trump. And the fact that Donald Trump is a laughing stock to countries all over the world. George Galloway said Luxembourg, a country that's not much larger in size than a large shopping mall's car park. I thought that was funny. But anyway, Luxembourg is a tiny, tiny country. I mean, it's really pretty much a fictitious that it is a country. So anyway, the larger issue with Trump, and we can believe that Biden will carry this on probably, is the disrespect of China that these asswipes who run America, these fascist criminals who run America, think that they have the right to send ambassadors to a province of China. They don't. Taiwan is Chinese territory, period. And this kind of disrespect has got to be answered. China answered it in a diplomatic but still firm way to put the imperialists in their place.
I have a passport to Luxembourg. Maybe I'll go there someday if I'm ever forced out of the United States somehow. I have ancestry of some kind in Luxembourg. That's how I got my Luxembourg passport. So it's a real country insofar, and as that goes.
Yes, as far as those kind of things, yes.
Anyway, I'm glad to hear that there's still there's an ongoing process of disunity among the imperialist powers, because insofar as Luxembourg is a country, it's an imperialist country wedged within these other imperialist powers.
Yeah.
And as Stalin observed, one of the main contradictions of imperialism is that the different imperialist powers tend to get into disputes over who gets the most resources, who gets primacy. And this Cold War issue, when it comes to both China and Russia, and to an extent Iran even, is inflaming this contradiction, is inflaming these disputes between the United States and the European countries over to what extent they should go after Russia and China and Iran. Some countries like Germany really aren't willing pretty much at all to sabotage their relations with this country, and this has caused Washington to act out more to try to sanction countries like Germany, like how this last summer Washington, I don't know if it actually went through with the sanctions on Germany or not, but it moved towards violating Germany's sovereignty, almost treating it like another regime change target country. And this is how bad unity between the imperialist powers has gotten because of this geopolitical tension, and because of this great power competition that Washington is so determined to carry out. And this seems like the main roadblock that's going to appear in Biden's mission to reunify all of the imperialist powers. Washington is going to continue on its trajectory of war escalations with Russia and China. So something's going to, some bad blood is no doubt going to remain between Washington and many of its allies.
Yes. The excuse me, got a frog in my throat. The the incident that you were referring to, I believe, had to do with the Russian Nord Stream pipeline project, which was almost complete when the United States put sanctions on the pipeline, and Germany complained about this, kvetched, or whatever you want to call it. And many of the German companies involved pledged that they were going to continue on this project, upon which the American empire threatened to impose sanctions on those companies. So I think what happened in the end was that the Germans get this big reputation in warfare of being, like the fierce warriors and all this, but they're really cowards, paper tigers, right? I believe that those German companies involved in the Nord Stream project. And this is a big deal to Germany, because it will bring under the Baltic Sea, it'll bring loads of new energy into Germany that they sorely need for their future, for their development. And the United States, under the Emperor Trump, under the Trump imperial regime, Trump imperial presidency, put the kibosh on that whole project. I believe it will be finished in the end, because it was very close to being finished when this occurred. I'll have to look back on where we're at with Nord Stream. Not quite sure, but yeah. Okay. Next on the list, number 8, the fading hegemon. The American Empire versus the PRC, that's the People's Republic of China, and the world. And this refers to a video also on RT. Let me see if I can find it. Here it is, I think. In the video, it was part of RT's business program called Boom Bust. A great name for a business program, Boom Bust. And the headline is, "Like it or not, U.S. no longer holding world in its palm, China is. Professor Richard Wolff to RT's Boom Bust." And it's a great video. I would urge people to watch it. It's from January 14, 2021. So I guess it's, anyway, I would urge people to take a look at this. It was really a good interview with Professor Richard Wolff. A lot of his friends apparently call him Rick, Rick Wolff. And I don't always agree with Professor Wolff. But I would say, probably 90% of the time I do agree with him. But I would say that he is probably at this point, the most well-known Marxist economist in the country, in the United States. So he gets a lot of coverage. And in this particular one, he was asked by Boom Bust's Sarah Montes de Oca, I should say, asked Professor Wolff, what is ahead for the dollar, markets, and the U.S. political system? And Wolff really just tore into the American, to the American empire. He says, "There's no question in my mind that the whole world is looking at the U.S. and it's seeing too many signs of decline and decay. He stressed that the process would be long. I disagree with him there. I think it's going to be a lot shorter than he thinks. But he thinks even 21 and 2001 that we're going to see, really bad shit happening to the dollar globally. And this is what I was referring to earlier. He talked about the current depression with 25 million unemployed Americans. I think the actual unemployment's probably twice that, but 25 million unemployed Americans. He concludes with, there's sense that whatever the U.S. was as the kind of premier capitalist country, holding the world in its palm, holding it together, the center of the free world, all of those phrases do not apply anymore. We are not the rising power economically in the world, he said. That's China. You may not like it, but it's the reality. So, Rainer, what are your thoughts on this?
I think that if this were something like 40 years ago, then he would certainly be right in saying that the process of imperial decline is going to be long. I think something pretty incredible about that book Settlers that's divided so many people is that during points in it, this author Jay Saki, I don't know if that's a pen name, but whoever this Jay Saki guy, in 1983 he predicted that in the coming decades U.S. imperialism is going to slip irrevocably into decline, and the U.S. is going to experience many internal economic problems because of this, including increasing poverty and inequality. And in this sense, given that this was able to be anticipated, this process of decline all the way back in 1983, I think that now, speaking in 2021, we can more confidently say that from here it's going to be quick. It's going to be a pretty rapid process, as it's been a pretty rapid process in this last year, in particular with the pandemic and with the new Great Depression. And now I'm hearing some predictions I've heard in this last year confirmed about how in 2021 there's going to be a dollar crash. We'll see what this looks like. I'm sure I'll learn a lot more about finance in this coming year. I mean, I'm not going to pretend I'm an expert on how this stuff works. And when this happens, whether in September of this year or sometime a lot earlier that we aren't expecting now, I'll be eager to report on it in the same ways that I've reported on the ways that COVID-19 has chipped into U.S. economic power.
Yeah, definitely. I agree 100% with you on that. I would like to point out that Jay Saki was not unique in any way, shape, or form for a Marxist commentator in the early 1980s. Pretty much all Marxist commentators, Marxist economists, Marxist leaders, thinkers, writers of any type were predicting exactly as Saki did. So
I'm trying to
nothing unusual about that.
I'm trying to figure out the timeline of how Marxists have thought in this last half century, as they've been confronted with factors that have been at play since the Vietnam War and beyond. These factors of economic crisis in the 70s that led to the spread of neoliberalism that correlated with the slow motion decline of U.S. hegemony, the rise of Asia, and then the breakaway of Russia from Washington's range of imperial control. And now that you point out how so many Marxists during that 1980s era were on the same page on this does make sense, because if you're a Marxist, if you study this kind of stuff, you gain an amount of insight into the future that many of your pro-bourgeois counterparts lack. This is why I say it's remarkable, because I imagine that in the 80s, the Reagan 80s, all this absurd idealism about the American dream and whatnot, with all of that being prevalent, I bet bourgeois academics and thinkers, commentators were nowhere near on the same page as that. It seems like even now they're not on the same page as us, which really speaks to their level of self-delusion and to the echo chamber that U.S. imperialism has created. How are the bourgeois propagandists going to be able to rationalize what's going to happen in this next year? Are they going to keep claiming endlessly that China is about to fall? This is the line I've seen from he's ethnically Chinese, but ideologically he's sickeningly pro-American. I don't remember his name, but in this last year he's kept claiming that China is about to fall, that COVID-19 was the first sign of this, but in the coming months it seems like he was forced to stop going along this line, because objectively the U.S. has been the one that's been falling because of COVID-19, and China, because of its quick economic and health recovery from this, has been rapidly rising. It's incredible how China is one of the few countries in the world that's in economically better shape and with better living standards than it was a year ago. Most of the rest of the world has fallen into economic disrepair, and over 100 million people in the capitalist world have been forced into poverty in this last year alone.
Yeah, it's quite amazing, isn't it? You never have to say you're sorry for being wrong when you're a capitalist commentator, and they're more wrong more often than right. If they were Marxists, they wouldn't last long publishing. They wouldn't publish for very long if they were that wrong that often. Ernst Mandel is one of the most prominent Marxist economists in the world at the time. He's dead now, but he was a Trotskyist, and he wrote a book. It was highly influential. It was highly influential to me. I mean, when I was your age, when I was in my early 20s, I was utterly fascinated by Marxist economics, and I read everything I could soak up on Marxist economics. And in 1968, Mandel published a book called Late Capital. It's about late capitalism in its late stage. And this book is pretty thick. I mean, I don't know if I'd even recommend it to a person like you who hasn't studied Marxist economics very thoroughly, because it's something, it takes a lot of foreknowledge to even understand what you're reading. And I had to read it a couple times to start getting the drift of what he was saying. But it was translated into English, I believe, in 1973. That's when it was first it came on the English. I think I probably read it in about, I don't know, 76 or 77, something like that. But in this book, first of all, Mandel was an advocate of the idea of long waves in economics. the idea that there are long waves in history, not just these short cycles, the capital, the business cycle, as they call it, the boom and bust of capitalism, the, recessions and depressions, and then recovery and the boom, and then another recession. He's talking about not a like a 7 to 10 year cycle like the business cycle is, but more a 50-year cycle of up and down for the economy. And he did a good job actually in proving that these long waves exist in that book. But what he did further was that he proved that starting in the late 60s, the globally, and I think he pretty much agreed that 1973 was a crucial year for starting this process in the United States. Certainly by 76, when the Jimmy Carter regime came in, that a long wave decline was going to be entered. And he predicted that there would never be a recovery from that long decline, that was late capital. And so far as I've seen, I have never seen a real recovery. Maybe it came somewhat close during the Clinton regime, at least in America, but not globally. But we've seen a precipitous, drastic decline in profitability during that period of time. Some ups and downs, of course. I mean, this stuff is never totally linear. But even to this day, I'm quite influenced and quite impressed by Mendel's tour de force answer to Marx's capital. And his answer is late capital. And I think at some point in their career, every Marxist needs to read this book. There's been a lot written about late capital since that time, but that was an extremely influential globally book. And I think that reading it today, it would stand up pretty well to what actually has happened in the intervening half century. So anyway, that's my final point on that. And the last point that we have here, topic number 9, exploiting the chaos to impose more surveillance and censorship. A little bit drilling deeper with on the censorship and surveillance state.
We've discussed in depth the censorship aspect, so we can get now into the surveillance aspect, which ties into this Great Reset that we've been hearing so much about. The thing about the Great Reset is, when you hear about it, it's not necessarily a conspiracy theory. It's a real thing that the Biden team has been embracing. I think it was last month or the month before that John Kerry, after Biden had won, he went to this neocon conference with other elites and discussed how excited he is to help carry out the Great Reset. During the same time, his think tank was calling for military buildup against Russia, and now he's appointed to this climate-related position within the Biden White House. So let's watch and see exactly what he does to try to build up the war machine. Anyway, the Great Reset is about fortifying the war machine, the surveillance state, and the police state, with the accompanying goal of trying to revitalize U.S. capitalism, all with the tool of the high-tech sector, of leaning onto Silicon Valley and big tech. They plan to, when it comes to the surveillance aspect, they've shown in their own documents that they plan to integrate extensive cameras into typical American city streets, that they plan to integrate surveillance technologies into normal household appliances, which will go along with the Internet of Things that they plan to normalize. They've shown that they plan to outfit American life with all of these conveniences, such as universal self-driving cars, such as replacing retail totally with home delivery, such as an Internet of Things. But this will go along with a level of AI-driven mass surveillance that we haven't seen before. The AI-driven mass surveillance that we've been seeing in this last decade with the rise of social media is alarming, but it's just a shadow of what they plan to implement. And this is what the Great Reset is about, and it's why many are so alarmed by it, because there is much evidence that the U.S. ruling class plans to exploit the pandemic and the economic crisis to manufacture consent for these kinds of mass surveillance, high-tech police state tools that we're going to see the Biden administration implement. And this Capitol Hill incident is convenient for them because it justifies further their drive towards expanding the surveillance state. I saw Caitlin Johnstone observe that according to the U.S. political and media class, it's been raining 9/11s and Pearl Harbors since January 6th. And this is the kind of hype that they've created, acting like everyone is in danger, like this is the end of this is such a great danger that the United States is facing, even though it's really just a momentary inter-capitalist conflict where some Congress people got scared for a day when these funny photos of them in the Capitol Hill building. They're going to use this as an excuse to take away more freedoms and to further implement techno-tyranny.
Right. This is a real frightening aspect, the Big Brother aspect. And yeah, we can expect a lot more of it now that Biden, the more effective fascist, has become president. This puts me in mind of when I lived in Baltimore in 2005, 2006. At that time, Martin O'Malley was the mayor of Baltimore. And this type of system that you described was already implemented all over Baltimore. Every fucking street had one of these cameras. You know, you'd go right to the police headquarters. Everybody was being spied on a continual basis. If you were outside, and God knows, I mean, they could probably spook into your windows, spy into your windows. I used to call O'Malley Big Brother O'Malley. That was not all he did. He had this program where they would round up thousands of people, street people, and arrest them. Street sweeps, you know. He was really a fascist, a Democrat fascist, a liberal fascist, and he the next year, I think it was, he became the governor of Maryland. And then in 2000, what was it, 2016, I guess, or 2012, he ran for the nomination for president on the Democrat platform. And he was presented, as this progressive, right? That was the amazing thing. Martin O'Malley is a progressive. He was presented as this progressive liberal in the Democrat Party. He didn't get anywhere that time. I don't know what's happened to him since, but yeah, Big Brother O'Malley. Britain is another place where this system has already been implemented for at least a couple of decades. They talk about how everywhere in London, you can't go anywhere without being spied on by these ubiquitous spy cameras that tie directly to the police stations around that country. So, yeah, I think we can expect absolutely under a fascist liberal regime like the Biden regime will undoubtedly be. We can expect a big ramping up of this form of surveillance police state. It's pretty bad news. Anyway, any more on that?
No.
Okay, good job, Rainer. And of course, always appreciate your stupendous contributions to our discussion, to our show. And I thank everybody for tuning in this time around. The January 21st episode of Socialist Review. We were a little bit late this week. We just had some technical problems early on, and we decided to hold off until after the inaugural and after the inaugural ceremonies, so that we could make more informed commentary on that. But anyway, until next week, thank you all so much for tuning in, and adieu until next week.